The interviewees are now gone. It would have been wonderful to have asked them to elaborate on some of their stories. One man escaped from a prison camp in Poland and made it back to the United States. How did he manage that? Many left Germany or Austria as children and emigrated to the United States. Some provided hair-raising details. Others offered very little. For the latter group, finding out more would have been a bonus. Still others led interesting lives after the war of which we know very little. Missing these details is minor compared to what we have learned from this oral history project. Together, their memories of their time at Fort Hunt were so vivid after some 60 years of having to remain silent, it quickly became clear that, for many, this time was a pivotal period in their lives, and the details remain fresh. While most of these men have passed away, Peter Weiss, George Weidinger, Arno Mayer, Guy Stern, and Paul Fairbrook are still very much alive, well, and as sharp as ever. Although well into their 90s, they have been very gracious and helpful, filling in many of the blanks for this story. 3 of the 4 elaborated on their intelligence training prior to their assignments to Fort Hunt. Peter Weiss shared more details about his early life in Europe before his family emigrated to the United States. Conversely, I knew a great deal about George Weidinger's early life in Austria, but not much about his experiences after he left the Army. He was gracious to fill in those details. Arno Mayer elaborated on his new life after his family settled in New York City. He shared much more about the time he spent with Werner von Braun when the German rocket scientist came to the United States. Arno and Peter were both picked up by Mamie Eisenhower on separate occasions while hitchhiking, and they wanted to make sure that I understood that both stories were not made up. Paul Fairbrook made sure I understood the nuances of how the Military Intelligence Research Service, MIRS, in which he was an integral part, worked. He sent me dozens of documents produced by his office, which filled in the holes I had encountered as I focused on this program. He also helped me understand how the German Military Documents Section, GMDS, program functioned after the war. Guy Stern elaborated on how his early life, growing up in Germany, was a great benefit to him as he interrogated German POWs during the war. He also helped me understand the value of his training at Camp Ritchie, as it prepared him for his intelligence-gathering assignments in Europe. A note about quotes. The quotes that follow come mostly from the National Park Service oral history transcripts, from interrogation transcripts, or directly from the men with whom I interviewed. In nearly every instance I copied the quote verbatim, but in some rare cases I edited the quote to make its message clearer. At some places in the text, quotes are emphasized. These are not direct quotes, but rather amalgamations of multiple quotes from multiple sources. So, for example, from the interrogation transcripts, opening questions and answers were similar, and by creating generic quotes I believe I have captured the verbiage common to most. Introduction. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. With silent lips she cries, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Emma Lazarus. In 1654, 6 families totaling 23 people disembarked from the St. Catherine ship in Dutch New Amsterdam, later New York City. They were Sephardic Jews who had fled the former Dutch West India Company outpost of Recife, Brazil, fearing they would become victims of the Portuguese Inquisition. They were the first known group of Jews to permanently settle in what would later become the United States. Several years later, other Sephardic families settled in nearby Newport, Rhode Island, and eventually built the Touro Synagogue, the first synagogue in the American colonies. Through the late 1600s and early 1700s, a trickle of Jewish immigrants came to the colonies. Then, in July 1733, 43 Jews arrived in Savannah, Georgia, after sailing on the ship William and Sarah. They were invited by the colony's founder, James